Welcome back to another episode of Modified Rides Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Burrell. Today I have someone I've worked with over the years, a few different magazines, known him even before the magazine days. We have Kevin Aguilar with Fuelish Media. What's going on, Kevin?
Nothing much. How are you, man? Just another day in paradise, I guess. Just working my ass off and all of that, getting the hustle going on and all that.
Well, me and Kevin's been back and forth. This man stays super busy, so it's hard to track him down. And we were just joking before we come on. He's said 9 o'clock at night his time, which is midnight my time. I'm old. I don't stay up that late. So we was able to squeeze this in. So I've worked with Kevin. I guess I knew you before you were at Street Trucks, but I worked with you there as a freelancer. How did you get into the whole magazine publishing deal? I think you started at, what was it, Tailgate or something?
Yeah, I think Tailgate was the first thing that I did. But before that, this wasn't on my horizon at all until I became a senior in high school. I wanted to be a structural engineer. I was very good at building things all the time. I had a good sense of how that all works. And I was going to do that. That was my thing. I was going to go to college and do this sort of things. And then I got into photography and I got photography class and it was like, oh, hey, this is fun.
So
I like doing this.
You took that in high school?
Yeah, in high school. So I think it was hard to get into. The class was always booked. And somehow we found that if you did it in summer school, you could skip that first year of it or whatever. You really just and get into the next year of it, which put us into a full class the next year. So we took the summer school class and we had a lot of fun. It was a lot of like field trips and all this stuff. Summer school. We didn't take it too seriously.
I was forced to take those a couple times, but that was a grades-based option there. So,
yeah, no, we did it as optional. I mean, we weren't doing anything else, and we're like, we get to hang out with our friends all day and take photos. Like, all right, cool, let's do this. So that really caught on with me. I really like to go, take photos, and talking about stuff back in the day, like it was so much different than it is now. Like when I grew up, you took your photos, whatever camera, and you hope that everything came out. You turned them in. You had to wait a few days, a week or so before you would see results. And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait that long. I want to see what I got. I want to see these photos that I documented and all that. And, then to get them back, and it was like, great, I got them. But then when I was a part of the process, you could see that stuff or preview it a little quicker. So yeah, totally different from, what it is today. It was a real process back then. So I'm really glad for that I learned it that way. And that I started shooting magazines on film, like you did probably, and that was the way of things, and the Street Truck staff was actually the one that pushed me a little bit more. I had a medium format camera, and they're like, shoot this, you've got to shoot more of this, because that, that's going to get us the quality and all that stuff, which a lot of people don't realize. I mean, it was a struggle back then, and the way you loaded a medium format camera, it's pretty complicated. Not as complicated as some of the things I learned, like big, 4x5 cameras, that's a whole different thing. But yeah, I mean, we were doing it back then, the same sort of thing. We turn in the work, but then the turnaround times were pretty quick on those. Sometimes we got them back in the day, so it wasn't too bad at that time in the early 2000s. But yeah, so basically out of high school, was into photography, went to college for photography, and I got into trucks. I was just at least they caught my eye, and it was like, oh, I kind of like that. And then I was like, how can I put all these things together? You know what? If I work at Street Trucks Magazine, then, I could take photos of these trucks. I could be in the truck world. I can have all that, have a job, and I'll be happy. So
you have a college degree for photography?
An associate's degree. So I went to City College, and then it was just, I could have gone on, but then I was already starting to freelance for Tailgate at the time. And it was like, well, I got my foot in the door. So I don't need to go on to another college or do anything like that, because I'm already working kind of or in the right direction where my goal is. So that's why I never went any further.
But you, at that point, you hadn't built any vehicles or anything. You just kind of...
No. I was just following it on, just a glorified spectator, basically.
So you started backwards from most of the photographers that are in this. Most of them were into the vehicles and then got into the photography, where you stumbled into the vehicles with photography.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I didn't get my driver's license until I was 17. I don't know what it was. I loved vehicles, but I just didn't have the desire to drive as much. I don't know. I think things were local to me in my city where I could walk anywhere if I needed to or whatnot. So
What was local?
that
Where'd you grow up at?
city of Downey, so it was a suburb of the LA. So and it was to put it into perspective, we were about 15 minutes away from South LA, Compton, all that stuff where all that stuff was going on in the 90s. We
Mm-hmm.
were just a hop, skip, and a jump away from all of that. So it was quite an interesting thing. I tell my daughter all the time because, we're in the city of Orange, now in Orange County, and she goes to school in a city called Villa Park. It's a pretty nice neighborhood. I went to her school in her bathroom, and it's a mall bathroom. I'm like, we didn't have doors on our stalls. We didn't have lockers. Like, just crime and everything was a problem. Like, you had to look behind your back and all that stuff. And it just kind of it takes me back a little bit because I'm like, wow, this is like a totally different dynamic than what I grew up with.
Yeah.
So
So after you got out of college, I guess you said you did the 2 years and then started freelancing for Tailgate. How'd you get hooked up with Gil out there?
it was Mike Sklem. So, getting into extreme lows back at that time and just talking with him, I was like, yeah, I want to, kind of shoot trucks and see what I could do with that. And then he had a connection with Gil because Gil wanted him to shoot for Tailgate. Because you always need somebody out there that can help, or if you can leave your take some off of your desk a little bit. So and then he was like, yeah, this is not for me, and he threw me at him, and we talked about it and doing all that stuff, and ended up doing some stuff. Now it wasn't I would say a tailgate shooter. I would shoot vehicles, and sometimes, occasionally, I would shoot the girls because that's what it was really about.
Yeah.
That magazine back in that day, and that wasn't me. And I was kind of a shy guy back then. Coming out of high school, I mean, I wasn't. I'm not an extrovert at all. I still not, but I was definitely not that personality to be chasing chicks around for shots and all that stuff. And really didn't. I mean, who doesn't like girls? But I mean, that just wasn't my character in doing that and some of the raunchy things that they were doing. But so it classed it up a little bit. But it was good enough to get my foot in that door and start working with them and all that. So
Now, once you were freelancing for Gil, where did that lead you?
where did that leave me? Oh, well, being in Extreme Lows, I knew Mike Self. So I started hanging out with him a little bit more. We started going to events, actually. I think I would pick him up and drive him around. So it's like a little bit of an escort service for him. It was like, oh, there's a show in Fresno, KRZ River Run or whatever. So, yeah, I'll pick you up. Let's go to it, and maybe we can get some work or whatever. And for me, it was just experience and getting into it because I wasn't into that car. I came from, like you said, the photography side. So, but I so wanted to be involved into everything. So we went to a few events. He had a Datsun he picked up that we dropped off at Bio Customs, if you remember that
Yep.
project a while back. And yeah, we just hung out a lot. We were good pals. We still are. I mean, he just lives a long ways away. So I ended up hanging out at their office a bit. And then at that time, my parents moved to Yorba Linda because they sold their house in Downey, and they were going to go up to the Northwest. They were going to go to Oregon or something, and they didn't. They sold the house so quick they didn't even realize it, and they were going to move up north, but they didn't have another house and they didn't shop yet. So we moved to Yorba Linda out here, which is a upscale place for Orange County. They rented a house out there, and then I realized that a few months into it that I lived literally down the street from Courtney Halliwell. So I started hanging out with him, and we got along great. Uh, he was just a cool, chill. He's relaxed and just, I think we were kind of personally on the same level with all that stuff, and he was really willing to help me out and like show me the ropes. And we drove to. No, I think I think I met him at no, not met him. I met up with him in Greenville at Showfest, and I was already going because I did that IF cruise at that time, so I went along
Oh
for
yeah, I
that.
remember that.
He had me cover that. Mike Self was doing it before, and Mike didn't do it the next year. I think it was maybe it was 03 or 04. And he was like, okay, well, if you want to do it, you're going along. Just go ahead and shoot it. And so I did that. I met up with him there. And then, we started doing features together. We would help each other out. Maybe he would do some exteriors, I'd do some interiors, and we would just knock them out while we, at events. And then we drove to Heatwave together, which I'd never been to Heatwave. So, hey, that's a lot of time we got to spend with each other in a car. So
And I find
you
it
learn
funny
about
that
somebody real quick.
most of my recent podcasts, they're all connected to Courtney. That they're like, oh, Courtney got me into this and Courtney got me into that. So it's been crazy that there's been so many podcast guests that are tied to one individual in this scene. So that shows you the footprint he had.
Yeah, and at the time, I really didn't have too many responsibilities. My parents weren't really like, "Oh, you got to get a job" or whatever. They were okay with me freelancing and the money that I was bringing in to be able to support myself, during that time. And I don't know if he got bugged or not, but I just hung out of their office. Anytime I had time, I was like, I just went down to the office. It was a 10-minute drive for me, so I was like, yeah, just go hang out and see what they're doing and see what I can help out on or whatnot. And nobody ever told me I was bugging them, but it was just kind of like, yeah, I'm just there. So, we maybe go to lunch or, go somewhere or whatnot, just or discuss things, whatnot. And that really was, my foot into the door of there. Just, that door was open for me all the time. I just walk in and just hang out and do whatever.
So you were just freelancing after college. You didn't have a job. You just
no, yeah, that was well, I did have a job because at the end of my courses, like or the last course is you had to have a job in photography to actually graduate with that degree. So I did get a job at a print shop. So I have that experience. Dude, we would like blow up posters, like huge,
yeah.
like 4 or 5 foot posters. We do all this stuff. They would do modeling, so I did like contact sheets and prints and all this stuff. And then that cooled off. They pissed off, I think, one of the agents they were working with and all that stuff in Hollywood at that time. And so that was cooling off, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to pick up more of the freelancing and do all that stuff. And my goal was to work in a magazine full time. And what had happened was, I think it was 2005. Sport Truck was going through some stuff. I know that Mike Finnegan went in,
Yeah.
and he was changing things there. And they hired another guy, Tom Gomez, who came from the lowrider side. And I guess things didn't work out there. And this was at the time also that I was working with Courtney and doing street trucks, and they left when there was a new owner, and they went to go do that trucks by what was it, the Enthusiast Network, the 10 thing before the other Enthusiast Network.
Brian
And
brought that up. McCormick brought that up in his interview on the whole deal, how they left. So if you're listening to this now and you hadn't listened to Brian McCormick's, go back and listen to Brian McCormick's. He breaks that whole departure down. So
yeah, and they wanted me to help them out over there and not street anymore, because I understand how it goes. Something happens and you just kind of don't want to help out on a certain book or don't want to help certain people out. And so that was kind of the thing. And at the same time, that's when that stuff happened at Sport Truck. And I think Courtney was the one that gave me Mike's number, Finnegan's number. He's like, hey, give him a call, see if he's got an open position, see if he wants you for it. And so I interviewed with it. I kind of came in there a little too relaxed, I think. And I think Finnegan was like, well, yeah, at the end of it, he's like, because I called him up after the interview, and he was like, I'm like, hey, what's going on with this? And he was like, oh, I didn't think you really wanted the job. You just seemed kind of like too relaxed. I was like, no, I want it. Like, I don't know. I just don't get too ahead of myself sometimes. So I guess my excitement level wasn't there. I don't know. I don't know. It's one thing going from, my dream was always street trucks to, it's like, okay, I got to go to another magazine called Sport Truck, which is a decent book. But at the time for me, it was like, that wasn't my dream job, so I didn't have that, enthusiasm going in. But still, I wanted to get the job and ended up getting it. So I was thankful for that. So yeah, that was great. Really,
what was you there? Was you editor there?
No, I was the feature editor. So they knew that I had a strong photography background, and they also liked the fact that I was shadowing Courtney, because back then, Brian McCormick and Courtney were like, they were pretty damn good at what they did at that time. Yeah, they were kind of the benchmark for everything, and everybody noticed street truck. Yeah, we had trucking back then, but street trucks was really where it was at. If you wanted the style, everything that was cool in the scene, trucking was a different dynamic. They had a lot of sponsors they had to appease and all that stuff, and I get it. That's just kind of how these books are run. But yeah, street trucks had the style, and him seeing that I was shadowing them, he was like, "Oh yeah, I got to be a part of this." So and yeah, this is going to be our guy to start shooting. And I mean, coming only had a few years of experience in doing it, and really wasn't to a huge volume. And it was like, whoa, now I'm the feature editor. It was like, whoa. And it was kind of a rude awakening about things, because I was really excited about it, because it was Prime Media at the time. And so it was mini trucking there. There was trucking, us at Sport Truck, and, the diesel titles and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, great. I get to work with all these crew, all these guys and everything. And it's just going to be so much fun. quickly what I found out is like, nope, every man for themselves. We were there in sport truck. That was it. We were not sharing stuff with mini trucking. We were not helping out people with trucking. Not at all. We stayed to ourselves. I'm like, damn it. Now we were pretty good with the mini truck staff at the time. Mike was there. We think it was Chad Lucas was there when I started, and we'd all go to lunch and everything. We'd hang out and stuff. So it still was a cool dynamic. But when it came to work, oh yeah, that was a different story. I remember one time I got chewed out by Mike Alexander for asking about an S10 that was going to feature at Showfest. And he just got in my face about it. I'm like, dude, have it. I don't care. I just
Come on now.
just asking the guy.
Mike Alexander ain't going to chew nobody out. Come on now. He don't
he just got in my face. It was never really a big deal, and it was just kind of like, oh, okay, well, now I know where my place is here.
So, but Finnegan was the one running sport truck when you were there.
Yes.
That was who when he left. Was that when John took over? When Finnegan?
No, John was before that. So it was
right.
Kevin Wilson was the editor, and that's when John came in. From what I heard, basically, there was another guy named Kalen Head that was working there.
Oh, yeah.
He met John O'Neill. He was working at Best Buy, and I don't know how that relationship started off, but I guess John, for some reason, I don't know how he got into it. He was into photography or something. That's how he got into everything. He was not, I don't think, into the truck scene at all. And so, if you know John O'Neill in the past, he was kind of wild, so that's how things changed over there. I think before Finnegan came in.
That was Johnny O. That wasn't John O'Neill.
Yes.
So I worked for him. I shot for him quite a bit at Sport Truck because I was shooting for trucking. I was shooting for street trucks. I was shooting for sport trucks. So I couldn't remember if he was before Finnegan. I know we did a big show in Kentucky that I know Finnegan and everybody was there doing the, what was the name of that show? The Prime Media, I guess it was Prime Media or Source Interlink, whatever, put it on.
Oh, yes. We were doing
it was
Havoc. Yes.
Yeah. I remember we were there, and I think like GM had brought some stuff out. I remember Eddie Sabreco was trying to figure out how to take the traction control off on a Trailblazer SF to do a burnout, like in the actual arena where the show was at. And I mean, it's, it's been past 7 years. We can talk about that stuff like that. But yeah, I couldn't remember who was where, because I know Finnegan was at mini trucking for a while, I guess, then went over to sport truck.
I think he was, earlier was in mini trucking. I forgot what happened. I know he got into boat racing and doing stuff like that, and I don't remember why he got off of mini trucking or what happened there. Yeah, but I know he was out of it, and then he came back in. And that's when things have changed for sport truck. Kevin Wilson went on. I don't remember what happened with him. He was gone. Oh, I think he went to the Enthusiast Network too, with Courtney and all that. I think he's headed that, and he was out. So must have been a better deal for him, whatever the situation was. And that's when sport truck, all that dynamic changed, because once he was gone, then John was gone, all that stuff. But John was really more the guy that changed sport truck at that time, because he was more going out to our mini truck events and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And because sport truck, I mean, even when I was in there, I would approach people about featuring their vehicles, and they're like, oh, well, that's sport truck, they only like static drop stuff. And it was like, no, we changed, it's a little bit different. We're showing airbag stuff, but they had that stigma for a while. And he was like one of the first people to really change that and really, showcase something a little bit different in that magazine.
Well, that was the good thing about me as a freelancer for everybody, is I could go to a show and look at a truck and go, that's a sport truck feature, that's a street trucks feature, where it gave me more opportunity to shoot more, to make more money at these events, because I wasn't pigeonholed into one style of vehicle. I could do everything, which is back where I'm doing now. I can shoot for anything, anybody, cars, trucks, it don't matter. I was shooting a lot of bikes back then too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the brilliance of being on your own, owning your own business or your brand, and doing your own thing, is that we can hustle it and do it wherever is possible. So, but and I didn't have that concept early on. Like I said, that was my goal, was working at street trucks, and that was it. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't broaden my horizons, even while you were about anything else.
Even while you were at sport truck, that was your goal.
I I would say yes. At the time, I was pretty content where I was at and didn't know what was going to happen. And that's the thing when the original staff was gone from Street Truck, so it was kind of out of the picture a little while there because things had changed a little bit. So I didn't know what was going to happen over there until I got laid off with Sport Truck. Then things changed, and
Was
pretty
that when
much. Oh,
they?
that was actually really really interesting at that time. That was when Travis Nowak was heading it. Jeremy Cook was there. Well, wasn't there anymore. So they butted heads for a while, from what I know. And then I don't know how Jeremy left, whatever happened. But then Travis was the guy over there. John O'Neill was there for a while too.
Yeah,
So, but anyways, and so that dynamic changed, and then Street Trucks moved into our same building as Prime Media, or at that time we were Source Interlink.
really.
And yeah, it was really interesting because it was like, oh, I just got laid off of Sport Truck. Let
I
me go
never knew
pack my
that.
things and put my stuff in my truck, and then I'm going to go back up from the 11th floor, go down to the parking lot. Then I'm going to go back to the third level and go look for some work. So weird.
I
And this
never
happened. This
knew
was
that.
Yeah, they were in the same office for I think 2 years together,
Well,
and
now
on different floors.
was that when Sport Truck closed, or was that?
They came in, I would say, a few months before Sport Truck closed.
No,
Yeah,
no. I mean, well, like when you got let go of Sport Truck, was that when they closed, or was that?
it was a few months before. Oh no, wait, it was '09, and I think they were done like at the end of '09 or something. Like it was like 6 months or 8 months or something like that,
They were
that
just
it closed
cutting
up.
back.
And what had happened basically is that was the recession time. So
Oh
for
yeah,
us, what had happened with Sport Trip was actually a bad situation. It kind of sucked because, uh, these magazines are run on advertising. That's what keeps the bills going. It's not really sales of magazines, it's advertising. And the way they had set it up was that if one of the sales guys sold a big account on Truckin', you got Sport Truck for free as a little bonus. So you got to advertise in there for free, for spending so much. So we really weren't seeing the ad dollars come in. So when the recession was happening and, there was less advertisers out there, we were getting less money and things got really tight, within the company, actually throughout everywhere. But it was really bad for us. So they had to tighten up and I got let go because I was the bottom man on the totem pole. We had already let Before that, we actually had Galen Armento was there because he was the associate editor. I was a feature editor. We had Kalen Head, who was the tech editor, and then
yeah.
Finnegan. So we had four guys on staff. Galen was first. He switched over to mini trucking because I think Ernie left. Well, and after Ernie was what's it? Nick from Surface came in, but he was doing the artwork and stuff like that. I don't remember who was helping him after Ernie, but so Galen went over there. I interviewed with Mike, and like he was like, "Oh, what about this and that?" And I was like, "Hey, I like variety," and he was like, "Okay, this interview's done," because they were picking between me and Galen, and Galen was more of a mini trucker than I was, and so I stayed at Sport Truck, which was great for me. But then, things got tight, and that was the bottom guy at that point. Even though we had three people on staff, we had to let somebody go, and unfortunately, it ended up being me, which was the end of that for me. I didn't know honestly what I was going to do at that point. It was the recession. It was hard to get gigs. I was a little bit different in how I approached things. I wouldn't say that I hustled as much, and I wasn't making the contacts that I should have. So yeah, I just didn't know what was going to happen at that point, and I ended up driving a school bus for a couple of years because it was like I needed a job, and I found a Craigslist ad for it, and it sounded like a good gig. So I was like, all right, let me go and do this. And it was the easiest thing I've ever had to do, to be honest.
I remember when you got that. I know it was like, yeah, I can see that now. Kids hop on the school bus, and you got this dude with the tattoos and the gauges,
Yes.
and they're like, "Oh, hi, Mr. Aguilar. I'm here for my school trip." So
It was a funny thing because I show up to, we were contracted, so I was with a private company. I wasn't with a school district. And so we would go into other territories where people just wouldn't see us or weren't familiar with us. So we go for a field trip or something, and the parents would see me and be like, "Whoa, wait a minute." Then we come back from the field trip, and all the kids are like, "Yeah, yeah, oh, he played music in there. Oh my gosh, it was such a great time." And the parents are like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. And you guys got back safe, so we can't complain."
So I'm still blown away by the fact that Street Trucks was in the same building as the Prime Media stuff, or I guess it was Source Interlink at the time.
Yeah, yeah, it
All these
was.
years, I never knew that was in the same building. So
Well, I mean, that was only for a short period of time of when that happened, and really, Street Trucks was like literally down the street from Prime Media, anyways. And I don't know how that all worked out. And it's when I started talking to Mike, and when he came or when he brought me into the office to go check things out, that's all I know where it was, which is the city of Orange, where I live now. Just happens to be, or the reason why that was why I moved here was because also, I mean, I had the job at Sport Truck, and that's when I moved to the city of Orange. It was right next to Anaheim. It was right there, so I didn't have that bad of a commute. But yeah, they were down the street, and then when I was out the door, I think it was like a couple of weeks before I was out, they had moved in, and so they were there for a couple of years together, and then I think Source Interlink had moved to an Irvine office down south a little bit. It's about like 15, 20 minutes away, and that's when things got a little different over there. So, and I think it was kind of the recession and probably trying to look at their expenses or whatever. I think that might have been an easier or better solution for them, was moving to Irvine.
Now, when you got hired on at Street Trucks, though, you said Travis was the one that was there?
No, well, when I was freelancing, so when I went downstairs looking for a job, it was Travis and Mulligan were there, and I already knew Mulligan. You know, I don't remember. I guess just out in the scene. Oh, he was also shooting at a studio. Oh no, he was doing yeah, at Icon. He was doing graphic design, I think there, or cutting out photos and doing stuff like that. He wasn't actually the one doing the shooting. So, and there was one point where I came in to shoot a truck because we kind of had a deal there that they would shoot a truck for free for us if we needed a studio because they wanted their name in the
Yeah.
magazine. And stuff, so it was a trade work deal. And he came in, and that's at the time he around the same time he built his OBS truck and all that stuff. So we were, we knew each other and talked and stuff and hung out a little bit here and there. And then when, it was Travis's deal, Street Trucks was, and dealing with Travis. And, then I was, working with Mulligan a bit while we were there and all of them. So, and became real familiar with them, and the same kind of thing like earlier, like, you know, freelancing was my thing. And, like it was at Street Trucks before when Courtney was there, I'd just kind of hang out. And then when Travis was there, I'd just kind of hang out and just, shoot the breeze to them and see what was going on, what they needed. And, just kind of get familiar with ourselves, to see how we can help each other. And, yeah, I just did that on the side. Then, after unemployment ran out, that's when I got the school bus driving gig. And I was still working and still doing stuff for Travis and Mulligan. And then that was going on for quite a while. And then Travis was out because he got the deal about doing realty, and Mulligan was there. And then it wasn't too much further after that and then Courtney passed away at that point, and the
Which
staff was kind of
that was one of
dwindling
the
down.
that was one of the big things that made Travis decide that he's like, hey, I need something a little more consistent and all that. And I had Travis on a couple weeks ago, and that was one of his things. Like, so close with Courtney, when he passed, like, all right, I don't want to be traveling to these shows all the time and eating crap and not taking care of myself. And then had the opportunity to step into the family business and with real estate and did. So,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people view it as a dream job, and it's really harsh. When I came, so let me back up a little bit. So yeah, I'm working the school bus and still doing the freelancing and all that stuff. Courtney passed, and I'm still doing everything. And they had a position open. Now, so Mulligan hit me up. He's like, "Hey, you want a job?" I'm like, "All right, let's see what's going on." And then Kevin Wilson was there at the time, and he was like, "I need help with diesel." And I'm like, "I'm not a diesel guy, but I'll help you in a magazine if it makes sense for me. If the pay is better than what I'm getting doing the driving, and I'd love to, do photography full time again." And I don't know what happened. A few months passed, and I hit up Kevin, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on with this?" And then all of a sudden, I get some information. It's like, "Oh yeah, we want you to work for Street Trucks." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even interview for that, but that's even better." So Mulligan was at the helm there, and I was the feature editor. And yeah, what I noticed at that time, going back into it, I've been a couple years out of it. I know Bob Ryder had worked there for a while, and Bob, I knew him from trucking. And I actually loved Bob Ryder because he was great. Even though at the time at Prairie Media, he was with the competition over there with trucking, and our staffs didn't get along. I got along with Bob. He was really cool. We'd always just kind of discuss things back then. So seeing him when I was at Street Trucks or when I came in, and he had some heart issues. I don't think he had a stroke like Kevin Wilson did, but yeah, then Kevin Wilson had a stroke too, and had a heart attack, then had a stroke while he was in the hospital. All the stuff that happened, and it's like, for me, I'm like, whoa, yeah, this is harsh. Like what they're expecting of us. You got to run around and do stuff, and then we got deadlines, and you're not keeping your health all the way up. So you're eating garbage. Don't really have time to work out or do anything like that. So you keep up on it, and it's just it's a harsh lifestyle under what we're being directed to do, having those deadlines and everything. And I see the sacrifices that a lot of people made, and I kind of knew, I was like, I'm not, this is not going to be a thing forever in doing that, or at least I'm going to approach this a lot differently. And at the time when I was telling them there, oh, looks like my internet connection went down. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, it said my internet connection was going down. Um, so my approach was different. I'm like, no, I'm not going to let this job become or be the death of me. Basically, I'm not going to let it run my life. And I just kind of figured at that point, like, this is a job. I love to do it, but that's it. It is a job. It is not my life. And that was kind of the struggles I had at Street Trucks, which I loved working on it, but the pay wasn't there. And a new boss came in for me, and we ended up doing more work, but I didn't get any raises at the same time. And it was like, I had to tell him, look, I got to push back. I can't be doing this. I'm not going to be doing your social media. I'm not doing your website. I'm not doing any of that stuff. I got paid to do this in the beginning, and that's what I'm doing. I have to look out for myself. Unless you give me a raise, and maybe I can make some compromise in some other places.
So I guess back up just a little bit. So I know Mulligan was there, and I know me and you discussed before that, when he put his notice in that he was leaving, like you were actually gone traveling, covering the show.
It was kind of and it was kind of a shock, actually, to be honest. I mean, he gave me kind of a heads up, like this new director came in, and she was just the way she did everything was completely different from the way we did things, which is fine. But she just got a little confrontational with people, and a lot of people didn't like it, and she rubbed people the wrong way. And he was one of them. He was just kind of like, I'm done with this. But I think at the same time, I think he also wanted to go on his own and realize that basically there's more money to get out there, and there's more that you can do. He had so much more potential than just working at the magazine. And for me at the time, I had just got this job for 5-6 months. I had a family, all that stuff, and it was like, I can't change. I got to stick this through and see what happens with it. And there was actually a little grace period between that time when he gave the notice and when I became editor. And I don't know what it was, if the lady wanted me to be like, oh yeah, I want to be editor, because I never really said it. I just figured like, okay, well, you're doing the job, because I was doing the job, and like nobody really offered it until I asked. So that was kind of interesting.
But you were also doing some of the other magazines as well, the F100 and C10 and all that, correct, right?
Yes. So I was there so I was freelancing when Mulligan started C10. Yeah, I think, yeah, he was at the helm doing it. That was after Travis. And, we discussed stuff about freelancing, whatever I can contribute and all that stuff. And we would always go back and forth. I would probably be there every month or so, the same thing, just kind of pop in and just, see what was going on, and just, catch up and see whatever I could help out on. And, that's when C10 came up before that, or around that time. And so when it was my turn, then C10 became my burden, or so to say. And then,
so you were doing both. You were doing Street Trucks and C10
yes.
when you took over.
Yes. And then Mulligan was also doing it was Max Drive. They were doing a magazine that was cars, and it was a bigger format and all that stuff, which ended up, it's not around anymore. Basically, I think it's partially their fault. They just never really had the right people taking care of it. And when Mulligan was gone, it just went to hell.
Yeah.
So it just really wasn't that organized and all of that stuff. But yeah, so.
Well, what was F100 Builders Guy? Was it there when you started, or did you?
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I was about to get around to that. So yeah, so C10 was successful. The first issue was really good. I mean, there was a sign of the times where things were going at that time. I think it was 2010, no, 12 or 13 actually, when C10 came out, the first issue, and it did well. And it was like, well, we're doing another one of these, and that did well. Oh, we're doing more of those, and so I got to a certain salary, and then it was like, yeah, we're doing this. How many more of these can you do? And I'm like, I can only do 3 a year. That's it. Like on top of Street Trucks. And, for me, it was it was actually really overwhelming. And especially knowing that back in the day, it was Steve Stillwell, it was Brian McCormick, it was Courtney Hallowell, and Mike Self. There was 4 guys on staff in the office.
Yep.
And now it was street trucks, 12 a year, just me. Now I had money budget for freelance, for you and everything and others. And then they wanted to do more C10s. I'm like, oh, I can't do all this. And then the idea came up about a Ford version of it. Now, it really came up with an advertiser. It was TMI Products. A guy that was working there, Larry Ashley, is kind of like, hey, you're doing C10? Why don't you do one on Fords? And then it was just like, wow, why didn't we think about that? That's actually probably a good idea. Let's go ahead and go forward with it. And the only reason I did that was for me to start a book myself and prove to them we could do it. And it went well. It sold out the first issue. We couldn't find any more issues, or people were trying to find them, couldn't find them anymore because they just sold out everywhere, as far as we know. And at that point, I was like, that's it. I'm done. Like, I'm going back to what I did originally. I started this magazine. You know that I'm successful at it. I could do a very good job at what I do, even starting new books. And you're going to have to find some other help to do it. I'm not doing it. And that's when things kind of went downhill from there for me. But I had to stand my ground. I knew my worth, and I also value myself to not put myself in that position if I'm not getting compensated correctly for it. And they didn't like that. They like to push people around and see they can push their limits and how far they could take them without having to pay more for everything that they're doing. And I mean, I'm coming off a high there. We had turned it around quite a bit, and advertising was like 150,000 we were making per issue, and I think I was able to see some of the numbers that basically it took about $35,000 with everybody's pay, printing the magazine, and putting everything together. So you're looking at about $100,000 per issue. I mean, after we're all paid off, everything, that's profit that they're getting out of it. And it was like, I'm not getting a piece of this pie, really?
But
Like,
you're the
I'm a
one
part
doing
of
all the
this.
work.
I'm not selling the ads themselves, but I worked closely with the sales team, and we worked back and forth. And I catered to those people that were advertising as much as I could. So I'm a part of that. Why am I not seeing any of that? So that's why I had the pushback. I valued myself, and, they were making so much more money than when I started. And I was like, no, you got to pay it back to me. And they could never see that for some reason. They just would never, and I tried hard. I tried different ideas. I was like, I wanted, let me take over this street truck group, get somebody else that we can share within the office to help out with this stuff.
And
Nothing. It wasn't working.
You were still in an office at that point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And, it kind of sucked that when Mulligan was there, he had an actual office. And then when I came in, because I was not the editor, I had a cubicle. And then when he was gone, somebody else took over his office. I don't know if it was sales or whatever. And I never got an office. It was like, oh, man, I really got shorted on that one.
So I guess you were the last editor to actually go into an office then.
I think so. Because when Chris got hired, yeah, I mean, he was remote, which was kind of a weird deal because I was telling my boss, like, so they moved from Yorba Linda. I still live in Orange, and Yorba Linda was 15 minutes away from me. They moved to Irvine by John Wayne Airport, which is really a 15-minute drive. But in the morning with rush hour, it was a 45-minute drive. And at the time, I had my 62 GMC with a 383 stroker engine in it, and it was just guzzling gas as I sat in the freeway. And I'm like, why am I coming in the office? I don't need to talk to anybody. They moved me away from the sales staff, or we got separated in the office, probably not intentionally. And I really don't need to communicate with anybody there. I was really trying to avoid my boss at all possible times because it would just be some other lecture at some other point. And it's like, go away. Like, I know what I'm doing here and I'm doing it well. Just stop bothering me. So I had no desire to go in the office. I'm like, let me work remote. Let me work at home. We have all the tools. We have everything to do all this stuff. I don't need to talk to everybody every day. I'm doing my work. And as long as, I'm turning everything in on time, which for the most part I did, maybe it was a little bit more later than I expected, but we were on time. And yeah, they weren't. My boss was not having it, which is interesting enough. So, and I remember one time I was a little bit late coming in, but not that we really had set hours. And I got rear-ended on the freeway. And I texted my boss, and, it was coming close to a deadline. We were kind of under the gun a little bit, but we had time. And I texted him, hey, I'm not coming in. I got rear-ended. My gas tank's leaking. I got to go check it out. I got to go take it to a shop or whatever. The next text he gives me is not, are you okay? It's, oh, hey, come into the office whenever you can. And like, that kind of really rubbed me the wrong way. Like, come on, at least have some compassion. Like I was just, in an accident on the freeway and you tell me get into the office. Like, there's more to life than that.
Oh yeah. And that goes for any industry though too, regardless of where you're at, trying to do more for less pay. I mean, I get it, the top brass are trying to save money and all that, but regardless of where you're at, it's like, hey, if we don't have this person, let's do, you do their job too, and we're still going to pay you your pay. You see it in like manufacturing and stuff all the time. You got one guy doing the same job for three guys, but getting paid for one. Well, does he get those other two guys' salaries? No, the management does.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then we had a lot of things going on too. When I got hired, it was under a guy named Nick. I can't think of his last name right now. But and we got along quite a bit. I'd go back and forth and tell him, hey, my ideas of what I wanted to do, and he would hear me out, and necessarily we wouldn't take action on all of them, but at least he was an ear to me. Would hear me out on these things, and he pretty much was forced out. He quit, but I think it was kind of like he got the option to quit because he was trying some different things. He was trying to get into the music stuff. They did some one-off issues that they were doing, and they all failed. And I think that was kind of the reasoning why he got pushed out. And then we went through a few other people that were heading the whole publishing company or publishing side of that company, and it wasn't working out. They hired another guy that, from what we heard, he didn't really say it, but he was. We found out that he was from Adult Friend Finder, so he was kind of. It was kind of interesting because like we would go to SEMA in Vegas, and he would never go to SEMA because I guess for some reason like he was afraid that he would run into somebody from the adult industry or something like that there and get found out about this. But and he was kind of interesting. He hired a lot of his friends and they all made six figures when they came in. There's probably like 4 or 5 guys that he hired. And man, that really put that company down. I don't think they ever recovered from that, basically. I mean, they were putting out a lot of money. Some guy came from like a newspaper in Chicago. Like, this is the level of guys they were trying to bring in. And it was like, you can't do this stuff with what we have. A guy coming from newspapers is completely different from automotive magazines. Somebody told me or explained to me this way is like, what we do is a black art. Like, there's no answers to it, but we learn how to do it. And we figure out new methods of how to cater to our audiences, and that's about it. Like, somebody from the outside cannot come in and just do our jobs. It doesn't work that way.
It's enthusiast driven at that point. You can't just be an outsider looking in.
Yes, exactly. And so they would try initiatives and do these other things, and I'm just like rolling my eyes, just basically like, you're wasting my time. Like, just let me get back to work. I'm not working on these things. Like, I didn't tell them that, but basically, just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, and I never do them because it got nowhere. It was just a waste of time is all it was. And I was at a point where I didn't want my time to be wasted. I was trying to enjoy my life outside of my work, and
it's
obviously,
a balance concept that a lot of companies don't have. I know when I was at Pepsi, they didn't care. You got done when you got done. I think I can count the times on one hand. I actually took my daughter to school, her whole career of school from kindergarten to senior, probably 5 times, less than 5 times her whole life. So there was no work-life balance. It was like, oh, we're shorthanded. Sorry, you can't do this. But so you said if you started the F100 Builders Guide, was you involved with the Motortopia deal, or did that come after you?
No, that had been there before me, to be honest. I think I don't even know when they had the website. They've had it for a long time before me, but they never did anything. It was on the back burner, nothing at all. They did try to start some stuff when I was there. That was probably one of the initiatives where I was like, screw yourselves. I ain't doing it.
Yep.
I mean, there was no kickback for me. There was, I think what had changed there for me was that when I was working with the sales staff, I noticed, oh, they got extra deals. They made more money. I had extra issues I was selling. I didn't make extra money. Like, really? Like, how was this dynamic happening? Why on that side, they're getting kickbacks and I'm not, and I'm helping these guys,
Yeah. Well, so after you got to that point with street trucks, how did the whole Fuelish Media come into play?
So I had this idea for a while, and to be honest, I was inspired by Hoonigan to seeing what they were doing over the years. You've been notice their Gymkhana videos, all that stuff, and that was one thing. But when I started working with them a little bit. I did a shop tour with them. because I was kind of curious how that was working. And this was before their YouTube. They were on social media. They had either it was close to a million followers or or they had a million followers. It was really big. So it was like every time I had the opportunity to be connected to somebody like that, like with Gas Monkey when they had their show, and it was like, oh, hey, I'm going to go and do something with them. They've got more following. I'm going to go see what that's all about and see how, I can scale things up a bit. And yeah, I just got enamored with all of that, and I was like, there's more to all of this than magazines. And I wanted to do more social media now, and I wasn't going to be doing it for Street Trucks because they weren't paying for it, but I
Yeah.
did want to do it, and that was kind of my goal. I really wanted to.
Well,
I wanted to do the.
who was doing the social media when you were at Street Trucks?
It
Were
was
you?
me or it wasn't. Yeah, and if I
You
didn't do it, it didn't get done, and I went like months without it getting done. So like it kind of became irrelevant for a few months that like I wasn't working on it. So
so they didn't have like a social media budget, like that kind of stuff. Because I know when I
nope.
was there, they had they had, and it flipped through a handful of people over the last couple of years, but they had someone that handled the social media aspect of it.
No, and that was one thing I was trying to get them to do is like I told them hire somebody for social media. Now it doesn't have to be just for me. It could be for a number of our titles. We share that. We all take on a portion of their pay and share that because I mean it takes work to do social media, but at our point we didn't need it like somebody full time to be able to do it, or at least on one magazine.
Yeah.
It could be something that part of the day they do this or that or whatever or whatnot, and they never would give it a second thought with me. I don't know if they just you were fed up with me at that point, just didn't give me the time of the day. I don't know exactly what it was, but that just was the way things were then.
Which is crazy because you look at your social media stuff for your company and it's ridiculous. Like it blew up out of nowhere. So
Yeah,
how long had you had the Fuelish Media? Was it before you left Street Trucks or did you start it after?
no, started the day that I got let go of Street Trucks. I mean, I had the ideas and all of that, and I was kind of thinking of some names. And back then, when I got out, and then it was like I cleared my mind. I haven't been skating as much as I had been then, but I skate pools, and we have some cool skate parks around here in Southern California. And I was like, I got to go skate and clear my mind. And then I was there, and I was like, yeah, I'm having a good time. And I'm like, I got to come up with a name for what I'm doing. And it was like, Fuelish. I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like I had that eureka moment of like, this is the name. I got it. I'd been searching for a while for something that would convey, what we were doing. It's automotive, but it's some sort of, word that I had made up, but also describes what we're doing. Kind of, it's Fuelish. I mean, we're spending money on stuff we don't need to spend money on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're having fun, basically. But it's related to automotive, and it all came together, and I was like, that's it. I mean, there was no question about it. That was the name.
Well,
And yeah,
I just looked it up and you have about the same amount of followers. If you started the day that you left the magazine, you have about the same amount of followers as the magazine you left.
it's gone back and forth. I had been chasing them for a little while, and then a couple of years ago, actually during COVID, I was actually ahead. And I think the algorithm's just not been my friend lately, so it's kind of
Yeah.
hasn't been growing as much as it used to be. So I think he's caught up to me. I had about a 20,000 follower lead at one point. So yeah,
Well,
and they had many years of a head start than me.
so after leaving Street Truck Zone, and you started Fuelish Media, is that where you got back into freelancing for other magazines or other companies, or were you just focusing on your Instagram? Because I know you took pictures of was it 2019? You took pictures of Cranberry in the lobby there at SEMA, and it's like the way you come in after hours and strobe and this and that. It's like those were crazy photos, but you can look at a photo like that, like we discussed at LST, you can look at a photo and know it's your photo. You have your distinctive, that's a Kevin Aguilar photo. That's a Fuelish Media photo.
Yeah, there's little things that I do that are different than other people. I mean, number one, I mean, you shoot with lighting too. Yeah, so that distinguishes you from a lot of other photographers. 'Cause
I try to shoot with it more than I do, but sometimes it's like I don't want to drag this stuff out and adjust the lights and you get hot spots and got to move. You spend twice as much time shooting with them, but some vehicles warrant having that. They have to have that look to it.
honestly, I do it all times except probably black or white, and even sometimes I'll use them in those cases too. I have a shoot right now that I'm doing right now that I shot a square body white truck in the middle of the day, almost noon, which you don't do. And I
No.
shot it with lights, but the way I figured it out, and the way some of the stuff that I do in post, it will come out good. I push those boundaries a little bit, and I think that's where things come in for me a little bit. Is I have a different approach. People say you can't do certain things. Well, I try to do it. Now, the only one rule that I have is black. When I shoot black, it's always or right after sunset. That's it.
Yeah.
I have shot black in the day, and it has some decent results, or with the sun up, and I do get good results. But I think the best time to shoot black is when the sun is down. But I'm open to try other things because of the situations I'm in sometimes. Or I've been around long enough that I know that you got to strike while the iron's hot. Sometimes a vehicle is there, it might not be in the right situation you want it to be in, but you have to make do. Otherwise, it's going to go to somebody else, or something's going to break with it, or it's going to get rear-ended or something, and that opportunity may not be there in a month. So if you're there, you might as well do it. Do the best you can. Maybe you can reshoot it if you want to. That's happened a few times to me, but yeah, you just got to get these things. So you got to adapt, and that's one thing that I learned. Post magazine world is adapting to new times. So yes, I was freelancing after that point, and basically I went to the competition. I went to the Enthusiast Network and started. I didn't do anything for trucking. I was talking to him, and that became an issue. I was doing stuff for Classic Truck, and then I met Nick Licata over at it was Chevy High Performance at the time, and what
Yeah.
he was working on. So I started doing some cars and doing some stuff other than trucks. But I learned how to adapt easily from that, because when I went there, and then in 2019, a year later, I was kind of invested in that. I did Diesel Power. They had
Yeah.
an event, and I was the sanctioned photographer for that. It was a big deal, which is nothing in comparison to what I get paid now. I thought I was getting a good amount of pay, $2,000 for a week. I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. And nowadays, I'm like, no, they can't even bother. They can't bother me for that. But anyway, so I was well invested into the competition, the magazines, and all that stuff. And in 2019, after SEMA, they just kind of let everything go. They dropped all the titles and all that, and I was like, holy crap! I put way too many eggs in this basket. And at the beginning of 2020, it was really just awakening for me. It was like, well, I'm doing this stuff, and I just got married. I
Who?
started this business.
Which publishing
And,
company let him go? The Enthusiast Network.
uh, yeah, well, it was Motor Trend at the time now, because when they were owned by Discovery now.
Yeah.
So when all of that happened, a few years later, they were like, well, we have the video stuff, and the magazines weren't making. They're making money, and that's why the guys that came from there have their own magazines now, because they're making a good living off of it. But to a company like Discovery Channel, making a few $1 million is nothing to them.
Yeah.
That's pocket change. It's not worth the risk for them to put a bunch of money out for staff and printing magazines and all that other stuff to make a few $1 million. It's a lot to take on. So they're like, no, we're just not going to do it anymore. So yeah, so that happened in 2020 was a real low point for me. The new year, just got married. I'm doing my own thing, and yes, I was doing the client work because I wasn't making any money with social media yet. It was in the plan to do it, but it wasn't happening at that point. So I had to take client work on, and all that went away. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? And I started, I was doing stuff with Nitto and the driving line stuff, but I wasn't doing it at the volume because their pay was less than magazines, obviously, because they were doing a lot of digital things.
Yeah.
But what I came to find out later is that, you know, sometimes they pay for stuff on their website, then it goes to one of their magazines or something, or they use it for advertising, and then you get some more pay later on, and it could be even better pay.
Also,
So it was like,
it's not like the magazines back in the day that if they use it once, they pay you once, and then if they use it in 3 other different titles, you don't get paid for it
yeah,
anymore.
you only get paid once. But with them, it's like on the usage, so you get paid for one thing, and if it gets used somewhere else in their initiatives, you get paid again. And sometimes
Right. Be.
it's the biggest jobs I've gotten is with them, or the highest, or some of the highest jobs that I've been paid on was through Nitto. So I just figured at that point I was at a low point. I mean, I came out of a marriage and we sold a house and I had a lot of money in the bank, and that almost went down to like nothing at that point. I was at a real low point as far as, how much money I had in the bank and everything and what I was making. And I just figured, you know what? The pay is a little bit lower here with this hire company, but if I increase my efficiency and just punch this stuff out, I'll make good money off of it. And that's what I did for a few months. And then just things exploded there for me. It really became my breakout year. So 2 years after I was out of street trucks was my breakout year. Nitto wanted me to do a vlog series. And they were paying a certain amount. And I was like, okay, I've never done this before. And, I'm not an extrovert type person, but, let's try this. And it ended up working. So that's a regular thing I do now as well. And then the other magazines started up, like CK Truck and
Yeah.
Classic Truck Performance. And then Nick
GMP.
from Chevy High Performance, he started All Chevy Performance. So I started helping him out now. And it's just been growing ever since. Like every year, it just keeps growing. And there's more demand and less time for me, but I'm making do. So sorry, I'm so busy that we had to bend around my schedule for us to do this podcast. But I got a lot of things going on. I got a 2.5-year-old in the house, and that's a handful too. So when I'm not working, I'm working on that.
Well, I totally agree. You if you have all your eggs in that one basket and you focus on that one like you do for a brand that's not yours, then you lose out. But same thing with me, like we discussed earlier, me and you push your own brands, you push your own, your own world, you get to control more of what you do and not depend on someone else to tell you what you can and can't do.
Yeah, and that's just exactly it. And the way I look at things now, or even when I was at Street Trucks, and I think I was trying to get to when I was talking to Nick, who was running the publishing company at that time, as I told him, I know this is not going to last forever. It's not going to last forever with me, and I'm okay with that. I just have to, I'm doing the best I can at the time, and I just got to be open to other things. And I kind of lost sight of that a little bit, when I was doing the stuff for, the magazines after Street Trucks, and just kind of, you have to adapt to things. You have to be open. New things are going to happen. I look day to day. I'm like, this is what I'm working on right now. Tomorrow that may change, but I think that I have enough weight in the industry and I have enough skill level and people know what I have and what I can do that I'm going to be able to find work. It's
Yeah.
just going to find it after that, and yeah, there might be some uncertainty in doing that, but I have other opportunities in doing so at the same time, which I
Well,
never had. Working in a magazine full time, you're limited. You're under contract. You can't do anything outside of that. And if you do and you get caught, I mean, you're going to lose your job anyway. So
well,
uh,
technically, I was a
it's kind of
contractor.
difficult.
So technically, as
Yeah,
a
you were
contractor,
different. Yeah.
I could have shot for anybody. I was working from home, and I know when I got hired, the first thing I said, all right, well, I do photos for several clients on a regular basis. I do a lot of like Meekum, a lot of auction stuff. I detail, is any of that can be affected? And I said, no, you're just a contractor. You can do whatever you need to do. And it's like, cool. But of course, I wouldn't step up and shoot for CK or somebody because it was quote unquote competition.
Yeah, direct
And
competition. Yes.
I would have felt weird about that. But, now, I just, it's kind of whatever. But, when you grow like you did when you left Street Trucks, that was a lot in my mind when I left Pepsi in 21. It's like, all right, well, I've done this long enough. I don't have to roll drinks 50, 60, 70 hours a week for somebody that could care less whether I show up or not. Like, I can do this on my own because people like you that I'd known for all these years did that and made a difference. So it's like, I knew I could. So that did weigh on my mind a lot when I did leave Pepsi, that people like you, and I used you as an example of making it. It's like, well, then there's no reason I shouldn't make this. And what's crazy is now it's like I have more free time and make more money now than I ever did or I ever could have at Pepsi. But
Yes, exactly.
I was terrified to leave. It's like, you're like, all right, I get a guaranteed paycheck this week. I get a guaranteed paycheck next week, where I may shoot these, 10 different things and I may not get paid for 6 months on it. But
Exactly, and that's part of the reason why I kind of forced myself to get, or forced the reasoning for me to get fired, was I was like, I'm gonna get unemployment for a little while to help me while I figure all that stuff out. So that's why I was with you. I was kind of shocked. I'm like, you're not getting any of that. You just up and quit. Like, you better have things in line. But that's also a little bit different. I couldn't work on a brand while I was over there. You were doing the Pepsi thing. It didn't really matter if you were doing stuff in media. You can build whatever you got to do. So I guess I kind of get that. It's a little bit different in where perspective of where we were at. So for me, it was just like, yeah, I'm gonna have to start with nothing after this job. So it'd be great if I got some assistance during that time.
Well, I know a lot of people, I've heard the comment made, well, if you work for this magazine, that can build your brand, that can, push you where you need to be. Where I think I was the one that started backwards. I started my own brand and grew. I'm nowhere near the follower count stuff like you have, but I've also had a lot of other stuff going on that I couldn't focus on it like you could or like I can now. But you know, I started that brand, created a brand, created a name, which got me that spot, which now I'm back to, pushing my own brand again. So, and, more
Yeah,
happy about that than I think I've ever been.
yeah, and the pride of ownership and just having having everything to yourself and having that ownership to yourself. I mean, is something that's is far beyond what we could do at any job. Just having that and knowing that you have some sort of security that you can make it on your own. You've got your own thing going on. Yeah, it gives you real good peace of mind there.
Yeah, I enjoy not having the deadline aspect and all that as well on a regular basis. Laptop on the couch every night to make sure that this was turned in and this was submitted and this was approved. And
And why I wanted to talk to you. I never really tracked you down. I'm busy, obviously, and I wanted to have a conversation with you about it, because I saw a post that you did. You were at a pool and you had your laptop, and I'm like, oh no, here we go again. Another guy's, getting used and abused basically. And I wanted to let you know, hey,
no.
don't let this job get to you. Like, live your life and know your limits and all of that stuff. Because I was very well in that situation. I had been on vacations, and it's like, I'm under deadline. I got to get something done. Maybe it wasn't a lot of work, but I had to work on something. And it's like you can't enjoy life that way when you're tied down that much. It's not the way to live.
Well, like last weekend, I was at, well, when this comes out, it'll be a couple weeks back, but I was at Mini Nats. First time I think I've not had a camera with me at a show in 2 decades, and it was so weird. Everybody's like, "Where's your camera at?" I'm like, "In my case." Like I didn't have it out, but I know which pool picture you're talking about. I was actually in Mexico, and we were on closing an issue out while I was in Mexico, and it's like I was trying to make stuff done. Well, now, like we discussed earlier, the week this comes out, I'll actually be in Italy. So I'm not taking I'll have my laptop, but I'm not going to be working on stuff. I'm going to be, shut down that week and going where the wife tells me to go. So,
Yeah, unfortunately nowadays, my laptop is always with me. I
yep.
mean, not when I run errands and stuff like that, but if I'm going on somewhere like, and I'm not planning on working, I was just on a cruise a couple weeks ago. I took it. I never opened it, never cracked it open, but I want to have it there just in case.
Yep.
Sometimes with these clients, sometimes you get something and it's like you got to take care of it, and it might not be something big. It's just you got to take care of it, sometimes. So, but fortunately, I was able to, take a cruise and really wasn't bothered with much work at all, to be honest. So, I am able to carve out that time nowadays. So, and that's
Well,
that's great.
well, back to the Nitto thing you was doing. Do you still do work for them on a regular basis? And
Yes, yeah, they're like my biggest client right now, and I'm not even like their top photographer or anything like that. I'm just the truck guy.
yeah,
They know that I've got experience with lower trucks, and that's my segment of what I do. Now, I do help on some other big projects here and there, but they've got some other guys that have been doing it a little bit longer. Uh, can I guess? Well, I would say that I don't put the quality in, but I know some of these guys have, are getting more pay, and like it's like one photo they're working on, so they can put some extra effort into that too. And a lot of some of this stuff, what I learned too is recently of shooting more cars is that it's kind of hard to break into something else. And, we've got, hot rods and muscle cars and all that, which I'm getting into more. Like it's taken me a while to break into that because there's other photographers that have their feet in it to certain places. They got things locked up. Other magazines that are with certain photographers. Like so recently with me, with Nick and All Chevy Performance, he had Wes Allison working with him, and it was kind of a weird thing at the time because Wes Allison was doing like hot rod, motor trend,
yeah,
doing this high level stuff. But now that he's not needed over there, he's kind of brought his rates down a bit, and it was more reasonable for magazines to be able to hire him or lower level magazines. And so he was locked in with Wes Allison, and for them, I think it was kind of like, yeah, we got Wes, and he's shooting for us. And I believe that I was at that level or a little beyond it because I've got some tools or skills that I do that are different than what he does.
yeah.
And he is a bit old school and he's really good. He really is.
he kind
But
of he kind of set the bar for a lot of the covers and stuff back in the day. Like you could tell it was a Wes Allison cover. Like he had that. I think he was one of the OG good guys back then.
yeah, and he's solid. He was doing stuff, commercially, bigger level and all that, but it's just kind of gone away and things have changed from that. So he scaled things back. He was close to retirement. Then he moved last year to your area, I think North Carolina, I think, to
Really?
kind of by you. Yeah, he moved to the East Coast. And so Nick was like, all right, well, on our car side, like, you're here, you're in Southern California, it's your territory now. And it's like, well, finally, like I can breathe a little bit. I've actually broken through on this, and I've got a shop down the street, Old Anvil Speed Shop. Now they were up and coming. They were kind of new kid on the block. They really broke into the hot rod scene and muscle car scene and that classic car scene, and they've really created a name for themselves. Paul over there worked for Hollywood Hot Rods. He worked for Hot Rods and Hobbies. He worked for Jimmy Shine. He's done all these things, and he started his own shop, and it's literally down the street from me. And I hang out with them all the time, but then it was like they had a photographer in there that basically he was always hanging out. And it was like, how do I get rid of this guy? I do so much more than this guy. How do I break in? And finally it happened. They just kind of pushed him away and like he's working at some other shops instead. And it's like these opportunities are finally
Yeah.
coming around, but it is so hard to break in, even if you're good at what you do. It's hard to, it's already established and people have their go-tos that they trust. And it's hard for a newcomer to come in and be like, I could do these things too. I could do them just as well, if not maybe better. And so it just takes time, to be honest. What I tell kids, in doing anything they want to do is never stop. Just
Yeah.
keep going. Be relentless. Never give up. You're going to improve. You're going to have failures, but you're going to, overcome them and everything. And that's kind of my story. I'm kind of surprised that I'm still doing this, but also I'm surprised at where I had gone to and where I am now. Because when I was doing stuff with Tailgate, I would tell people also, I want to kind of do stuff with street trucks. I want, that's kind of what my goal is. And people would tell me like, man, that's going to be impossible. That's so hard to get in there. You're never going to make it. And I ran the show for a while, like, and then at that point, like when I was running it for a while, then I was like, this isn't enough. Like, I got to get paid more. Like, I
Yep.
had reached that ceiling. I'm like, I got to go somewhere else and do something else.
Same.
But so yeah. So I mean, that's what I would tell people is just, know your goals and know what you're going to do and just keep doing it. Even though, I went aside and I was driving school buses for a while, I just kept doing the work and just kept going at it. I didn't really realize that it would end up that way, but that's what happens. Opportunities come your way if you're there. Let's say, I don't know, you want to do something with movies or something like that, or some production company or something, or some other trade skill. Just start sweeping shop, get an entry level job. Somebody's going to leave at some point. You're going to learn something there, and there's going to be an opportunity. So just like keep going with your goal and continue to do it. Just even if it looks hopeless, maybe things might change. With me, at my dream job, it changed, and then my goal changed, and now I'm on to something else. But I keep growing at that point. So just never give up, basically.
Same thing. I had the same dream job you had, and then goals change, and then now it's time to push things even higher. So, with your Instagram, the Fuelish Media, is that your only outlet, or do you have a Fuelish Media YouTube? What's your go
I
to on?
do. Yeah, my go-to is Instagram. Uh, it just seems to be where everybody's at. Well, things have changed with TikTok, and who knows what's going that with getting signed where it is.
Be banned.
They're gonna ban it. Who knows? And TikTok really, I've got a following on there. I haven't posted in like 2 years now. Things were going in a good direction, but nothing was happening for me. I wasn't getting jobs versus, based off of that. I get jobs based on Instagram. Now I do have a Facebook as well. I post the same things up on there, but I'm not a Facebook person as much. I'm on there occasionally, here and there, every couple of days. But I'm always posting. I do have a YouTube for Fuelish as well, but I kind of stopped or pushed back on the YouTube on my brand because of my client work has gotten so high. I did want to make some investment in my time, but it cost me money to make videos and put them out. I'm not making money on those, and it cost me because there's jobs that I can't take while I'm working on that.
Yeah.
And I've got a paid series with Nitto, and I'm just at the point now where I'm like, I've already got this. I'm going to keep that over there, and I'm going to keep up on my social media, all that stuff. But the client work has gotten so big that it's like, this is really where I'm making my money. Now I want to keep this stuff just to have a backup plan. That's always a good idea to have a backup plan. That's what I didn't realize when I was at Sport Truck. When I got laid off, it was just like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, I wasn't talking to anybody else. I wasn't doing anything else. At least with Fuelish, I have this for myself, and it's going to take me forward no matter what, because I'm always posting stuff that I have that's current on there. And usually, and sometimes I use it for promotion for whoever I'm working with. It's like, hey, go pick up this magazine. I did the shoot for them. It's
Yeah.
good quality. I mean, we've shot it and all that stuff. So I've got that there, and it's always going to be there. So, yep.
Well, I know real quick, the one thing we've not discussed is I think the one vehicle you've been known for, you don't even have anymore. That
Yeah.
your Pewter S10 with the purple flames. Did you build that at Street Trucks or was that at Sport Truck?
That started, well, I actually started with tailgate, to be honest. I've had the S10 ever since I got into everything. I mean, I wanted trucks and I had a truck, you know, starting out with photography, and that's, was my introduction in everything, and, went further and further. But while I was at tailgate, we didn't really do tech articles, but I ended up doing one. And I was like, hey, I wanted an Envoy front end for my S10. And I got a bumper from Steve Platt. He had his old bumper, and I had to buy a grill, and then I got the headlights from Mike Slam, because he did the full Envoy swap. So I got his Sonoma headlights. I gave him a couple $100, I think. And so I put everything together. That's what happened with that. Then with Sport Truck, then I wanted to do more of the retro thing, because that was kind of cool. And the mini trucks back then, in the mid 2000s, was kind of grabbing onto a retro look for mini trucks. And I wanted to do stuff like that. And I wanted to do a lettering on the tailgate, which they didn't have at the time on new vehicles or even S10s. I was like, old school vehicles, it said like Chevrolet.
C10,
and so,
yeah.
yeah. And then so I was like, I went to the junkyard and I found a C10 tailgate, and I started measuring it. And I'm like, oh, hey, this will work if I modify this or that. Had it done. And that's kind of when the truck started to take shape. And then that's when I got it painted, was over there. And Custom Works, I was working with him a lot, with Corey over there. And he was like, yeah, I'll paint your truck. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm driving to Texas and you're going to paint my truck. And then I did, sort of that retro sort of look on it and everything. And it's kind of funny now is that whenever I mention that truck, people might not recognize it right away, but when I tell them, oh yeah, it's got that C10 Chevrolet tailgate in the back, and they're like, oh, that's your truck you own.
Yep.
So yeah, but so that truck was built a long time ago. Adam at Musso Motorsports, he did the air ride for me a long time ago, and I still give him credit for it. He put the KP kit on it and everything, got me going with everything with it. But
I talked to Adam about at least 6 days a week still. So,
but
30. When you messaged me, said, "Hey, I can do it in about 30 minutes." I was on the phone with Adam when you messaged me. So
nice. But so I had all that stuff done from early 2000s. It got so old. The valves, I was replacing this all the time. I was having so many different issues, and not with anything that he did bad. It was just
technology.
Yes, things had changed and got better. That was everything that we had put in my truck was as good as we could get back then. And we didn't have Acura, we didn't have these things, and it just became a burden to me. I love the truck, I still do. I got to drive it at LST this last year because
I didn't know you sold it. I saw it sitting at LST, and somebody's like, "Oh, that's Kevin's old truck." I'm like, "What do you mean old truck?" And then you drove by. And I'm like, "Do you even know how to drive that truck still?"
Yeah, I'm never gonna forget. But anyways, so the cool moment for me, so I sold it. A buddy of mine, Jeff Baum, it came up in conversation. I was like, yeah, I need to get rid of this truck because it's not doing anything, and somebody else could enjoy it. I love the truck, but it just doesn't fit in with my day to day, and it needs a lot of maintenance. And he was willing to take it on. And he was like, yeah, I want first dibs if you're going to sell it. And I'm like, are you serious? Took it from there, talked about a price. Now, it wasn't really incredibly high or anything. I mean, it probably is going to increase in value with time because mini trucks are getting hotter with time. Nostalgia kicks in a little bit, but I just wasn't going to wait that time anymore. And I have my 62 GMC I want to work on. So I sold it to him. And what happened to LST was that, he's been bringing it to shows out there, and Steel Flame came out there. Now, my truck had a history with Steel Flame. I took the original bumper that was on it, the Envoy bumper. When it got wrecked, I took that and put it on my truck, had it repainted and all that stuff. So we have some connection. I met Steve at Sport Truck Specialties, down here. It was in Carson in Southern California. and we have some connections. So Steel Flame was out in Texas. My truck was out in Texas. It was like these trucks haven't seen each other in a long time. So we did a little bit of a shoot, and Jeff, I think his mother was having some issue. His mother-in-law was having an issue, something like that. In the family, there was some medical things going on, and he couldn't make it out. And he was like, "Here's the keys. Just go take it to the shoot and do what you got to do. I'd love to go, but priority, your family comes first. Obviously." I was like, "Oh, great! I get to drive this thing." And he fixed the AC and all these other things that I never had time to do. It's like it was a whole new experience driving it again. And then I was like, "Wow, this thing really is slow."
Yeah, it was
But
cool.
it was
It was cool to see you driving in that again. So
well, and it was great. I mean, I drove my truck there one time, and it was Gator Drag at the time. Now this was a number of years ago. This was like 2008 or 7 or around there, and LST wasn't around. But it was kind of cool. Like I drove around LST, and like people were taking videos, and I was like, "Whoa!" It's when I had this truck and when I was taking it to shows, people weren't doing stuff like that, and I was like, people were still, it was still a head turner, which is really cool at a place like LST, and to be able to take it around there was a great experience that I was able to get, even though I sold it. So I was still able to see that, yeah, people still like that truck. I still like it.
yeah. Well, I won't keep you much longer. So for people looking for you, I guess Fuelish Media is what the all one word is where they find you on Instagram.
Yep, pretty much. It's got yellow behind the logo. It's if you spell it correctly, fuel, Fuelish. It's probably the first thing that pops up on everybody's searches because no other Fuelish has more than that. I think when I started, there was somebody in Denmark or something doing something else. It wasn't really even media related. It was something else about racing. They had a Fuelish name, and obviously I surpassed that. But yeah, it's pretty easy to find. You'll see trucks. You'll see, photos of good quality vehicles and all that stuff on there.
Well, it's definitely cool to catch up. I know we've been friends for a while, and work for each, work together at the magazine and stuff for a while. So, definitely cool to sit down and chat and hear a little bit of the backstory on some of that. So, I
Yeah,
guess
definitely. And I'm glad to see where you're going with everything and to have, taken things in your own hands and, you're scaling it up too. So it's great to see, us old geezers basically. I mean, we've been around forever, we're still out there and still doing it and, kind of making a name for ourselves. It's kind of interesting. Like I said, taking me aback sometimes. It's like thinking of like, I was just kind of fooling around and doing this and had a certain goal. And it's like, wow, to look at where I'm at and where I'm going with this stuff, it's pretty amazing. Just you're never stopping and just continuing to do it, and it'll pay you back. So I know you're gonna pretty much do the same thing on your end. We're in different territories, so you're not competition to me, but yeah, I'd like to see you strive, man. You've been doing some good work, and it's great to see that you're making something out of it.
cool. Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming on, man.
Oh, no problem. Anytime, man.